Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work as a software consultant and travel a lot for business. After years of cramped economy flights and terrible sleep before important meetings, my company finally approved business class travel for long haul flights. This particular trip was to Frankfurt for a major client presentation, and I was already stressed about it. The project had been rocky, and this meeting could make or break our contract. I booked with Lufthansa because they have this policy where they guarantee the middle seat in business class stays empty unless the flight is completely full. It's marketed as extra space and comfort, which I desperately needed since I plan to work on my presentation during the flight and maybe get some actual rest. I got to the airport early, checked in, and made my way to the gate. The flight was pretty full, but I was relieved to see that business class wasn't completely packed. I settled into my window seat and noticed a man in his 40s or 50s in the aisle seat across from the empty middle seat. He seemed normal enough, business suit, laptop bag, the usual. About 20 minutes before takeoff, a woman and teenage boy approached our row. The woman looked to be around the same age as the man in the aisle seat, and the boy was maybe 16 or 17. The woman asked if I was sitting in the empty middle seat. I looked up from my laptop and told her no, explaining that the seat was supposed to stay empty as part of Lufthansa's policy for business class. She got excited and said there was no problem then. She demanded that I switch seats with her so she could sit with her family. I was confused and asked her to repeat what she said. She explained that I needed to switch with her because her seat was in economy, but she needed to sit with her husband and son. She pointed to the man in the aisle seat who was now looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact. I told her I had paid for business class and wasn't switching to economy. She argued back that they were a family and families should sit together. She said I was just one person who didn't need all that space. The teenage boy looked embarrassed and kept tugging on his mom's sleeve, telling her to leave it alone and that they could sit in their assigned seats. But Karen refused. She turned back to me and said it was ridiculous. She demanded that if I wouldn't switch with her, at least I should let her son sit in the empty seat next to me. She reasoned that I had an empty seat I wasn't even using. I explained that wasn't how it worked and that I had booked with this airline because they guaranteed that seat would stay empty. She called me the most selfish person she'd ever heard of and asked what kind of person needs two seats. At this point, other passengers were starting to stare. The man in the aisle seat finally spoke up and suggested to his wife that maybe they should just go back to their seats. She snapped at him not to call her honey and said she wasn't sitting in economy while he was in business class. She told him I needed to be reasonable. Then she turned back to me with this entitled smile that made my blood boil. She said she was going to get the flight attendant because she was sure the attendant would sort it out. She claimed families have rights, and she actually did it. She flagged down a flight attendant who came over looking puzzled. The flight attendant asked if there was a problem. Karen explained that I was refusing to let her family sit together. She said she needed me to either switch seats with her or let her son use the empty seat next to me. The flight attendant looked at me and asked if it would be possible to accommodate this family. She explained that if I agreed to let the young man sit in the middle seat, it would help them avoid any delays. I said no and reminded her that I had paid for this configuration. I told her that seat was guaranteed to remain empty according to the airline's policy. The flight attendant agreed I was absolutely right. She told Karen that the seat must remain empty unless both passengers in the row agreed to the change, and I had declined. Karen got louder and shouted that they were a family. She called me just one selfish person who didn't need two seats. I could see other business class passengers turning to look. She yelled that she knew her rights and accused the airline of discriminating against families. The flight attendant told her she needed to return to her assigned seat so they could prepare for takeoff. Karen called it outrageous and said she was going to report the airline. She kept saying I was being completely unreasonable. The flight attendant had to call for backup because Karen refused to move. A second flight attendant came over and warned Karen that if she didn't return to her seat immediately, they would have to remove her from the aircraft. Finally, the husband stood up and told her to come on and that this was embarrassing. The son had already started walking towards economy with his face red from shame. Karen gave in but said it wasn't over. She threatened to write to corporate about the discrimination. When she walked off, she made sure to bump my shoulder and claimed it was an accident. For the entire 4-hour flight, the husband spent his time making passive-aggressive comments just loud enough for me to hear. He muttered that some people have no consideration for families. He said it must be nice to have so much money you can waste it on empty seats. He commented that some folks never learn to share. Every time I took off my headphones to eat or use the bathroom, he was still at it. The flight attendants were clearly aware of what was happening because they kept checking on me and apologizing quietly. About 2 hours in, one of the flight attendants approached me quietly. She apologized for the situation and asked if I wanted them to speak to that passenger about his behavior. I told her that would be great because I was trying to work and prepare for an important meeting. She went over and had a quiet word with him. He stopped for maybe 30 minutes, then started up again, but more quietly. When we were deplaning, Karen had apparently been stewing in economy the whole time because she was waiting for me at the gate. She asked if I was proud of myself and complained that her son had to sit between two strangers because of my selfishness. I told her that her son had to sit in the seat she bought him, and that's how airlines work. She said we'd see about that and threatened to post about this on social media. She claimed everyone would know what kind of person I was. At this point, I'd had enough. I told her to go ahead and post about how she tried to scam someone out of a business class seat they paid for, and how her husband spent 4 hours harassing another passenger. I said I was sure people would be very sympathetic. She stormed off without another word. The crazy thing is, I actually felt guilty for a moment, but then I remembered that I'd paid almost 3 times the price of an economy ticket for the extra space and comfort. This wasn't some arbitrary decision. I had an important presentation the next morning, and I needed to be at my best. The flight attendants were absolutely professional throughout the whole ordeal. One of them even slipped me an extra snack and a handwritten note apologizing for the disruption. I ended up nailing my presentation the next day, partly because I was able to get some decent rest on the plane and finish my preparation. The client renewed our contract for another 2 years. I paid for what I got, and I shouldn't feel bad about that. I'm 19 and still living at home with my parents. My older sister moved back in with us about 2 years ago when she got pregnant. She's 24 now and has a 1.5-year-old daughter. The situation at our house is pretty messed up, and yesterday it all came to a head. My sister has never really been what you'd call responsible. Even when we were kids, she was the type who would start projects and never finish them, make promises she wouldn't keep, and somehow always find a way to make other people clean up her messes. When she got pregnant, we all hoped maybe having a baby would change her, make her grow up a bit. From the moment my niece was born, my sister treated motherhood like it was some kind of part-time job she could clock in and out of whenever she felt like it. She'd disappear for hours without telling anyone where she was going, leaving the baby with my parents or me. When the baby cried at night, my sister would just put a pillow over her head and let someone else handle it. She'd feed her when she remembered to, change her diaper when the smell got too bad to ignore, and basically act like having a child was this huge inconvenience that had been forced upon her. My parents stepped in immediately. They bought all the baby supplies, set up a nursery, and took over most of the actual parenting duties. I found myself helping out more and more too. I'd always been good with kids, and my niece is honestly the sweetest little thing. She deserved better than what she was getting from her own mother. Over the past year and a half, I've basically become like a second parent to my niece. I wake up with her when she cries, I feed her breakfast most mornings, I play with her, read to her, and help put her to bed. My parents and I have developed this whole routine where we trade off responsibilities, so the baby always has someone taking care of her. My sister just kind of floats in and out of this arrangement whenever she feels like being a mom for a few minutes. The weird thing is, My sister acts like she's still the authority on everything related to her daughter, even though she barely takes care of her. She'll disappear all afternoon, then come home and start giving orders about what the baby should eat or when she should nap. She criticizes the way I hold her, the games I play with her, even the clothes I pick out for her. It's like she wants all the control but none of the actual work. Yesterday morning was a perfect example of how crazy this situation has gotten. My niece had just woken up from her afternoon nap and was calling for me from her crib. This happens a lot now. She's gotten used to me being the one who takes care of her, so when she wakes up, she calls my name instead of calling for mommy. I went upstairs and did our usual routine. Changed her diaper, which was soaking wet because my sister had put her down for the nap without checking if she needed changing first. Read her favorite book about the little duck who gets lost. Then I carried her downstairs to get her a snack because she was getting fussy, which usually means she's hungry. I put her in her high chair and started cutting up some banana slices for her. She loves bananas, and they're healthy and easy for her to pick up and eat by herself. I was sitting next to her watching her eat and making silly faces to make her laugh when my sister finally decided to make an appearance. She asked what I was feeding her daughter. I told her it was just some banana slices because the baby was hungry when she woke up. My sister looked at the banana pieces on the high chair tray and got that expression on her face that meant she was about to start complaining about something. She told me I shouldn't give her daughter bananas. When I asked why not, explaining that the baby liked them and they were good for her, my sister said it was because the baby would just mush them all over the tray and make a huge mess. She said then she'd have to clean it up later, and that would make her life harder. She called me really annoying. I stared at her for a second, trying to process what she'd just said. Here was this woman who hadn't changed a diaper all week, hadn't gotten up with her daughter once during the night in months, and spent most of her time either out with friends or locked in her room watching Netflix. And she was complaining that me feeding her daughter a healthy snack was going to make her life harder. I asked if she was serious. She said yes, she was serious, and that I always did stuff like this without thinking about how it affected other people. I've been holding back my frustration for months, trying to keep the peace for my niece's sake, but this was too much. I told her that if she had a problem with how I was taking care of her daughter, then maybe she should start taking care of her herself. She asked me what I said, like she couldn't believe what I just said. I told her she heard me right. I explained that I get up with her daughter at night, feed her breakfast, change most of her diapers, play with her, read to her, and put her to bed. I pointed out that mom and dad buy all her food and clothes and diapers. I said she shows up maybe once a day to criticize something we're doing, then disappears again. And I told her honestly, she probably wasn't even going to clean up those banana pieces anyway because mom would end up doing it like she does everything else around here. My sister got angry and started yelling. She said how dare I judge her parenting and that I had no idea how hard it was being a single mother. She claimed she was doing the best she could. I told her no, she wasn't. I said her best would be actually being there for her daughter instead of treating her like she was everyone else's responsibility. She said she didn't ask me to take care of her daughter. I told her someone had to because she's a baby and can't take care of herself. My sister then went on about not understanding the pressure she was under and how being a single mom was the hardest thing in the world. I told her maybe she should try actually being a mom instead of just calling herself one. At this point, my parents heard the yelling and came into the kitchen. My dad took one look at the situation and immediately went to pick up my niece, who had started crying because of all the shouting. My mom asked what was going on. My sister said I was attacking her parenting and being completely unfair to her. I explained that I told her if she didn't like how I take care of her daughter, she could start doing it herself. My dad suggested we should all calm down and talk about this later. But my sister wasn't done. She kept going on about how hard her life was and how nobody understood her struggles and how unfair everyone was being to her. She acted like she was a victim in all this, like we were somehow wrong for stepping in to take care of her child when she wouldn't do it herself. The conversation kept escalating until my sister walked out of the house, leaving my niece crying in my dad's arms. She didn't come back until after midnight, and when she did, she went straight to her room without checking on her daughter. This morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She came downstairs while I was feeding my niece breakfast and started talking about her plans for the day like the argument never occurred. When I didn't respond, she got huffy and said I was being immature for holding grudges. Even after everything that happened yesterday, she still expects everyone else to keep taking care of her daughter while she does whatever she wants. She left again this afternoon without saying where she was going or when she'd be back. My niece is upstairs napping right now, and when she wakes up, she'll call for me like always, because that's what she's learned to do. I know I'm not her father, and I know it's not technically my responsibility to raise her, but someone has to look after this little girl, and if my sister won't step up, then I will. The whole situation is just insane to me. My sister wants to have all the authority of being a parent, but none of the actual responsibility. She criticizes how everyone else takes care of her daughter, but won't do the work herself. What really gets me is how she plays the victim card every time someone calls her out. She acts like being a single mother automatically excuses her from actually being a mother. Yeah, it's hard, I'm sure it is. But that doesn't mean you get to dump your kid on everyone else and then complain when they don't do things exactly the way you want them done. I work as a night shift nurse at the local hospital, and after 12 hours of dealing with difficult patients and their families, all I wanted was to get home peacefully. It had been one of those shifts where everything went wrong, we were understaffed, the coffee machine broke, and I had to deal with 3 separate medical emergencies. When I clocked out at 7 a.m., I was exhausted and just wanted to crawl into bed. The morning traffic was typical for rush hour bumper to bumper, moving at a snail's pace. I was driving in the right lane, going exactly 35 miles per hour in the 35 zone. I always stick to speed limits because I can't afford a ticket on my salary. And honestly, after seeing what car accidents do to people in the emergency room, I'm pretty careful about driving safely. That's when I first heard the honking behind me. At first, I thought maybe someone was honking at a different car or there was an emergency vehicle trying to get through. But when I checked my rearview mirror, I saw this woman in a bright red sedan practically glued to my bumper, laying on her horn like her life depended on it. She was gesturing wildly with her hands, and even from my car, I could see she was screaming something. I checked my speedometer again, still 35. I looked around to see if maybe I was blocking someone who needed to merge or if there was some other issue, but no. The lane next to me was just packed with traffic and we were all moving at the same speed. There was literally nowhere for me to go even if I wanted to let her pass. The honking continued and continued. For 10 solid minutes, this woman was blaring her horn at me, like I was personally ruining her day. Other drivers started looking around confused, trying to figure out what the commotion was about. A few people in nearby cars were shaking their heads at her behavior. I decided to just ignore it. I turned up my radio, kept my hands on the wheel, and focused on the traffic ahead of me. In my experience, road rage incidents usually fizzle out if you don't engage. Plus, I was too tired to deal with whatever drama this woman was trying to create. But apparently, ignoring her was the worst thing I could have done. The traffic came to a complete stop about 2 miles ahead due to construction. When we were all stationary, I heard a car door slam behind me. I looked in my side mirror and watched when this woman, who I could now see was probably in her 40s, with blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, walked up to my car. She started yelling at me through my window, calling me names and accusing me of driving like a turtle and holding up traffic. She demanded that I was being smart and thought I was better than everyone else. Her face was getting red when she stood right next to my driver's side window. I kept my window up and my doors locked, which seemed to make her even more furious. She kept shouting at me, demanding that I roll down my window right now so she could talk to me properly. I shook my head and pointed to the traffic ahead, trying to indicate that I wasn't the problem. We were all stuck, but she wasn't having any of that logic. That's when she started kicking my car. The first kick hit my driver's side door with a loud bang that made me jump. Then another, and another. She was literally using my car as a punching bag, kicking it with all her strength while screaming at me through the glass. She kept shouting that this was what I got for being a jerk and that Maybe next time I would drive like a normal person. Her voice was getting hoarse from all the yelling, but she didn't stop attacking my car. I grabbed my phone to start recording, but she was moving around too much and kicking too aggressively for me to get a clear shot. Each kick was leaving scuff marks and small dents in my door. My car isn't anything fancy. It's a 10-year-old economy car that I bought used, but it's mine and I take care of it. Watching this stranger destroy my property while I sat helpless inside was infuriating. Other drivers were starting to get out of their cars to watch the show. A few people had their phones out, probably recording the whole thing. But nobody was stepping in to help, which I understood. You never know how crazy someone might be, and this woman was clearly unhinged. Karen kept kicking and screaming for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 30 seconds. Then suddenly she stopped mid-kick and her face went completely white. I followed her gaze in my rear-view mirror and nearly laughed out loud at what I saw. Two police officers were walking toward us, and these weren't small guys. They were both tall, broad-shouldered, and had that no-nonsense expression that cops get when they're about to arrest someone. One of them was already pulling handcuffs off his belt. The first officer told her to step away from the vehicle and put her hands where they could see them. His voice was calm but authoritative, leaving no room for argument. Karen looked like she was trying to decide whether to run or play innocent. She chose poorly and immediately started making excuses. She told the officers that she was thankful they were there and claimed that I had been driving recklessly. She tried to paint herself as the victim in the situation. The second officer cut her off and explained that they had seen what happened. He told her they had been sitting 3 cars back watching her assault my vehicle the entire time. He ordered her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. The change in Karen's demeanor was instant. The righteous anger disappeared, replaced by panic and fake sweetness. She started claiming there must be some misunderstanding and that she was just trying to get my attention because I was driving dangerously. The first officer wasn't buying it. He told her that kicking someone's car repeatedly was destruction of property and assault, and that she was under arrest. They started putting the handcuffs on her right there. When they cuffed her, Karen started crying and begging, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding and that I had provoked her by driving slowly. She kept looking at me through my window like I was somehow going to back up her story. I rolled down my window and spoke to the officers. I told them I had no idea what her problem was and explained that I was just driving the speed limit in stopped traffic. I mentioned that she had been honking at me for miles and then just got out and started attacking my car for no reason. The second officer reassured me that they had seen the whole thing and had dash cam footage of everything. He asked if I was injured and I told him no, but that she had definitely damaged my car. The officers took photos of the dents and scrapes on my door, got my statement, and gave me a case number. They explained that Karen would be charged with destruction of property, disorderly conduct, and assault. One of them mentioned that their dash cam had caught everything, so it would be a pretty straightforward case. When they loaded Karen into the back of their patrol car, she was still crying and insisting she was the victim. She kept claiming that none of this was fair and that I had started the whole thing. But her fake tears didn't work on the officers, who had literally watched her attack my car for no reason. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. Karen had pleaded guilty to avoid trial, probably because of the video evidence. She was ordered to pay full restitution for the damage to my car, plus court costs and fees. The body shop estimate came to $800, but with all the additional penalties, Karen ended up paying over $2,000 total. The company I worked at had this weird culture where everyone bragged about how many hours they worked. People would compete over who stayed latest, who worked weekends, who answered emails at midnight. It was like a twisted badge of honor. What I quickly realized was that most of these people were just incredibly inefficient. They'd spend 3 hours doing something that should take 1 hour, then act like heroes for staying late to finish it. From day one, I was different. I came in at 8 sharp, worked efficiently during the day, finished everything I needed to do, organized my tasks for the next morning, and left at 5. My manager had been flexible with me when I needed to leave for doctor appointments or take longer lunches for personal stuff, so I figured we had a good working relationship. I threw myself into the work and actually enjoyed it. I streamlined processes, caught errors that others missed, and consistently delivered quality results ahead of deadlines. During my performance reviews, I got nothing but praise. My manager would tell me how impressed she was with my work, how reliable I was, how much she appreciated my attention to detail. After a little over a year of this, I felt confident enough to ask for a raise. I knew I was severely underpaid, like embarrassingly underpaid compared to industry standards. So I requested a 20% increase. Yes, it was a big ask, but I had done my research and knew it was the maximum allowed by company policy. I figured they'd counter with something smaller but reasonable. The rejection came swift and brutal. My manager called me into her office with this serious expression. She told me she had reviewed my request and couldn't approve any raise at this time. When I asked her to help me understand why, especially given my excellent performance reviews, she said it was about perception. She explained that I came in at 8 and left right at 5 every day while everyone else worked late, and that I never offered to help others when they were overloaded. I was stunned. This was coming from someone who had praised my work constantly. I pointed out that I completed all my responsibilities during regular hours, thinking that was what I was supposed to do. She insisted it wasn't just about getting my own work done, but about being a team player. Then she dropped the real bombshell. She told me this feedback had actually come from someone else on our floor who had noticed my schedule. When I asked if this was someone who didn't even work with me, she said it didn't matter because perception was reality in corporate culture. I walked out of that meeting feeling completely deflated. But I'm not one to give up easily. If she wanted perception over reality, fine, I could play that game. Starting the next day, I began messaging my manager every afternoon around 4:30, asking if there was anything she needed help with before I wrapped up for the day. Day after day, she would tell me everything was good and thank me for checking. I documented every single one of these exchanges in a Word document. I also started staying until 5:15 or 5:30 some days just to see who was actually working late. Turns out almost nobody. By 5:05 the office was basically empty except for maybe one or two people who were probably just scrolling social media. This went on for weeks. Every day I'd offer to help. Every day she'd say no. I was starting to feel like I was annoying her with my daily check-ins. Finally, she had enough. She told me I didn't need to keep messaging her every day asking if she needed help. I said okay, but wanted her to know that I was available if she needed assistance. I added that I couldn't be expected to know her workload if she didn't communicate it to me. She didn't like that response. I could tell by the way her face changed that I had struck a nerve. She said she didn't appreciate my attitude. I told her I wasn't giving her attitude, just pointing out that if she wanted me to help with additional work, she needed to tell me what that work was. Things got awkward between us after that conversation. She started being cold and dismissive. I'd say good morning and get barely a nod in return. During team meetings, she'd acknowledge everyone's contributions except mine. It was like I had become invisible. I knew I had to get out of there. The work environment had become toxic, and it was clear that no matter what I did, I wasn't going to advance under her management. I started job hunting immediately. The search took about 5 months, but finally I got an offer that was 60% more than what I was currently making. 60%. It was validation that I really had been severely underpaid. When I gave my 2 weeks' notice, my manager seemed genuinely shocked. She asked where I was going, and I told her I had found another opportunity that was a better fit. When she asked what they were offering me, I told her the salary, and I watched her face go pale. She said they could match that and even give me a promotion. I asked her where this flexibility had been when I requested a 20% raise after a year of excellent performance. She said things had changed, and my value to the company had become more apparent. I pointed out that my value had been apparent a year ago, but she had chosen to focus on perception instead of performance. She tried to convince me to stay for another 10 minutes, making promises about better projects and more responsibility, but I had already made up my mind. I told her I appreciated the offer, but had already accepted the other position. 2 weeks later, I walked out of that office for the last time. My new job turned out to be everything I hoped for and more. The culture valued efficiency over face time, results over perception, and actual teamwork over meaningless gestures. A few months later, I heard that my old manager had been struggling to replace me. Apparently, they went through 3 different people in 6 months trying to fill my role. None of them could handle the workload or maintain the quality standards I had set. My replacement was hired at a salary that was 40% higher than what I had been making, so they ended up paying more anyway, just to someone who couldn't do the job as well as I had. I love gardening. My grandmother had this amazing garden full of wildflowers and herbs when I was growing up. She taught me about native plants and how they're better for the environment because they don't need as much water or chemicals. When we moved into our house, the front yard was just basic grass and a couple of boring shrubs. It looked fine, but it felt lifeless to me. Last winter, I spent hours researching plants that would work well in our climate. I wanted something colorful that would attract butterflies and bees, but I also wanted to be smart about water usage. Our area has been dealing with drought issues, and I thought native plants would be a responsible choice. I made detailed plans and even measured everything to make sure I stayed within our property boundaries. This spring, I finally started my project. I planted a small flower bed along the walkway leading to our front door. I chose beautiful native wildflowers, some desert marigolds, and a few other colorful plants that are supposed to bloom at different times throughout the year. The whole bed was maybe 6 feet long and 2 feet wide. I spent a weekend carefully planting everything and making sure it looked neat and tidy. I was so proud of my little garden. Every morning before work, I'd water the new plants and check for any signs of growth. After about a week, I could see tiny green shoots starting to emerge. I felt like such an accomplished gardener. Then I came home from work on a Tuesday to find a folded piece of paper taped to my front door. My heart sank when I saw the official Homeowners Association letterhead at the top. The notice was typed up all formal and intimidating. The letter said my flower bed was non-compliant with community standards and needed to be removed within 10 days or I'd face fines. It was signed by Karen, one of the board members. I'd seen her around the neighborhood before. She was probably in her 50s, always walking her tiny dog and seeming to inspect everyone's yards. I was honestly shocked. I mean, they were just flowers. Pretty neat flowers that weren't bothering anyone. I immediately went inside and pulled out the Homeowners Association rulebook that we got when we bought the house. I sat at my kitchen table and read through every single rule about landscaping. The rules talked about keeping grass healthy and not letting weeds take over. There was stuff about not blocking sidewalks or planting invasive species, but nowhere did it say anything about not being allowed to plant flowers. In fact, there was an entire section encouraging residents to create attractive landscaping that would enhance the community's appearance. I read that section 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. The rules specifically said that native plants were preferred and that any landscaping should complement the natural environment. My flower bed checked every single box they listed. I decided to take photos of my yard from different angles and screenshot the relevant pages from the rulebook. Then I wrote a polite email to the Homeowners Association president. I'd met him once at a community meeting and he seemed like a reasonable guy. I told him that I had received a notice about my flower bed being non-compliant, but after reviewing the rules, I believed there might be some confusion. I explained that my plants were all native species, they didn't block any walkways, and they fell under the attractive landscaping guidelines in Section 4 of the rulebook. I attached the photos and rule screenshots for his review. I hit send and tried not to worry about it, but honestly, I barely slept that night. The idea of having to dig up all my carefully planted flowers made me sick to my stomach. The next morning, I got a reply from the president. He apologized and said the notice should never have been sent. He told me that I could completely ignore it, and that my flower bed was perfectly fine according to the actual rules. Then he added something that made me laugh out loud. He admitted that Karen just didn't like anything that wasn't traditional grass and shrubs. He said she tended to get a little overzealous about enforcing her personal preferences rather than the actual rules. I felt this huge wave of relief wash over me. I printed out his email and kept it just in case Karen tried anything else. Over the next few weeks, my flowers really started to take off. The desert marigolds bloomed first, creating these bright yellow patches that looked amazing against the green leaves. Then the other wildflowers started opening up in purples and oranges. It was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. Neighbors started stopping by to ask about the plants. The elderly couple next door said the flowers reminded them of their hometown in Arizona. A mom from down the street asked if I could write down the plant names because her kids loved watching the butterflies that had started visiting. I made up little plant lists and handed them out to anyone who was interested. Within a month, I'd given the list to at least 6 different households. Meanwhile, Karen clearly wasn't happy about the situation. Every single time she walked her dog past my house, she would slow down and stare at my flower bed with this sour expression on her face. Sometimes she'd shake her head like she was personally offended by the sight of wildflowers. One afternoon, I was watering my plants when she approached with her dog. She complained that the flowers were awfully bright and asked if I didn't think they clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. I told her that I'd actually gotten a lot of compliments on them and that several neighbors had asked for the plant list. She grumbled that she still thought grass looked more professional, so I reminded her that the Homeowners Association president had confirmed that my landscaping followed all the community guidelines. She just huffed and walked away without saying anything else. A few weeks later, I noticed that the couple across the street had started planting their own native flower garden. Then the family 2 houses down added some colorful plants to their front yard. It was like my little flower bed had started a trend. Karen's reaction to more and more yards blooming with native plants was amusing to watch. She'd walk by each one with that same disapproving look, but there was nothing she could do about it. Every single garden followed the Homeowners Association rules perfectly. Now it's been several months and my flower bed is thriving. The plants have spread a little and filled in beautifully. I've seen more butterflies and bees in our neighborhood than ever before. Kids stop to look at the flowers on their way to school. Karen still walks by and gives my garden dirty looks, but now she has to glare at half a dozen other yards too. Last week I saw her stop in front of the house across the street and actually leaned over their fence to get a closer look at their flowers. I think she was trying to find some rule violation to complain about. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.